Most people think a betrayal sounds like a loud argument or a door slamming shut in the middle of the night. But for me, it sounded like a soft buzz. A quiet, almost polite little buzz, coming from underneath our bed on a Tuesday morning in October. I had reached down to grab a fallen sock. My fingers touched cold plastic instead. I pulled it out slowly, the way you pull a splinter, dreading what comes next. It was a cheap, battered flip phone. The kind you buy with cash. The kind that leaves no trail. No passcode. No lock screen. Just one open message sitting right there like it had been waiting for me. The commitment papers are ready. She'll be locked away by Friday. I read it 3 times. Then I sat on the edge of our bed. The same bed I had shared with this man for 10 years, and I felt the floor disappear beneath me. I am Clara, and for 3,650 days, I was the invisible engine behind a multi-million-dollar tech firm right here in Richmond, Virginia. I wrote the code. I managed the patents. I handled the payroll, the legal filings, and the tax structures. I was the architect of everything. Elias was just the face. And that morning, I learned that the face had decided the architect was no longer needed. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to have me declared mentally unfit, locked away in a facility, so he could strip my 50% share of the company and walk away clean. The most dangerous person in your life is never your enemy. It's the person you are pouring your soul into, the one you trust with everything, while they quietly plan your disappearance. Today, you're going to see exactly how I found out, how close I came to losing everything, and what I did about it. Before we go further, drop in the comments and tell us where you are watching from right now. We love hearing from our community. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this one. Stay until the very end, because today's shout out goes to someone who left a comment on the last video that honestly stopped me cold. 10 years ago, Elias did not have a company. He had a laptop, a folder full of half-finished ideas, and a charm that made people believe in things that did not yet exist. I had something different. I had skills. I remember the afternoon he spread his notes across our kitchen table in our small apartment in Alexandria and said, "Clara, this software could change how mid-sized businesses manage their entire digital infrastructure. I just need a little more time to build it." What he meant was, he needed me to build it. I did not mind. I believed in him the way only a woman in love can believe in someone. Completely. Without conditions. 3 months later, when we ran out of money to pay for the cloud servers, I drove to my aunt's house and sold the gold jewelry my grandmother had left me when she passed. A bracelet, 2 rings, and a small necklace with a cross. I got $2,200 for all of it. I remember sitting in the parking lot of that pawn shop, holding the cash, telling myself it was an investment in our future. That night, I stayed up until 4 a.m. writing code. Elias slept soundly in the next room. That became the pattern of our life together. I coded through 2 miscarriages. I filed patents under a shell company I quietly registered in Delaware, because I knew, even then, that smart builders protect their work. I handled every HR decision, every vendor contract, every quarterly tax document. I was the engine, the mechanic, and the fuel. Elias? Elias shook hands. Elias gave speeches. Elias smiled for photographs. And I told myself that was okay. We were a team. That was how we worked. Fast forward to last spring. The firm's annual gala at a hotel ballroom in downtown Richmond. Elias walked onto that stage in a suit that cost more than my first car, accepted a Regional Tech Innovation Award, and spoke for 11 minutes about his personal journey and his vision and his relentless drive. He did not say my name once. I sat at table 7 with a glass of water and a smile I had practiced. The woman beside me leaned over and whispered, "Your husband is so impressive." "He really is," I said. I believed it too. That was the worst part. The morning after I found the second phone, I moved carefully. I did not confront Elias. I walked to our home office while he showered, sat down at the main computer, and tried to log into the company's back-end server, the same server I had personally architected 7 years ago. Access denied. My credentials had been revoked. The timestamp on the lockout said 11:47 p.m. the night before. While I was sleeping beside him, Elias had cut me out of the system I built. My hands went still on the keyboard. I heard his footsteps in the hallway. Then the office door opened. He was holding a glass of water, tie loosened, watching me with an expression I had never quite seen on his face before. Not anger. Something quieter than that. Pity. "You look tired, Clara," he said softly. "Are you having those visions again?" I turned to look at him, and I understood, in that exact moment, that whatever was coming had been in motion for a very long time. Visions. That word had never existed in our home until about 8 months before that morning. Elias had introduced it carefully, the way you introduce a rumor, slowly, casually, always with concern on his face. It started small. He would mention, over dinner, that I had seemed scattered lately, that I had left the stove on, that I had apparently called our accountant at 2 a.m. and left a rambling voicemail, which I had no memory of doing. I had brushed it off. I was stressed. We were preparing for an IPO. Of course I was running on empty. But that morning, after he said those words and walked back down the hallway, I did not go back to the locked computer. I went to the living room, sat on the floor, and I started thinking clearly for the first time in months. When exactly did he start calling them visions? That afternoon, while Elias was on a call in his office, I searched the house. Not frantically, methodically, room by room. I was looking for anything that did not belong. I found it in my own dressing room. Tucked into the upper corner of the ceiling molding, nearly invisible against the white paint, a small wireless camera, no bigger than a thumb. It was angled directly at my vanity mirror. I did not touch it. I stood there, staring at it, breathing steadily, thinking about how many mornings that camera had watched me get dressed while I had no idea. Later that same day, our neighbor Mr. Pratt knocked on the front door to drop off a package. He was polite but awkward. As he turned to leave, he paused and said, "You know, Clara, if you ever need anything, help with anything, the whole block is here for you." His tone was soft, the kind of soft people use around someone fragile. Elias had already talked to them. He had been painting a picture of me, the unstable wife, to our entire neighborhood, building a case, laying down witnesses. That evening, I slipped into the guest bathroom and checked the second phone I had tucked inside my robe pocket. There was a new message thread on it, and the name attached to one of the contacts stopped my breath cold. It was Bart Hensley, my family's personal attorney, the man who had handled my mother's estate, a man I had trusted for 15 years. His message to Elias read, "Psychiatric evaluation is scheduled. Everything is aligned on our end." I sat on the edge of the bathtub, and held the phone in both hands. Bart. Even Bart. I went to the medicine cabinet to splash water on my face. That is when I saw it. A prescription bottle on the second shelf, labeled with my full name. A medication I had never been prescribed. The fill date was 2 weeks ago. He had a pharmacist filling prescriptions in my name. Think about that for a moment. This man had a camera in your dressing room, a medicated paper trail in your name, your attorney in his pocket, and your neighbors primed to describe you as erratic. Now ask yourself, if this happened to you, would you even know how to fight back? I was still standing there, bottle in hand, when the front doorbell rang. I heard Elias's footsteps. I heard the door open. I heard voices, calm, professional, male voices. Then Elias appeared in the hallway with 2 men in dark suits behind him. He looked at me with that same soft pity. "Clara," he said gently, "these are some friends from the clinic. They just want to talk. Be honest with me right now. Was Elias right to use her mental health as a weapon? Or is this the single, most evil thing a person can do to someone they once promised to love? Comment evil or justified. I want to see what you think." I looked at those 2 men in suits, and something shifted inside me. Not fear. Something colder than fear. Clarity. I smiled at Elias. I said, "Just give me a minute to change." He nodded. He believed me. That was his first mistake. He had spent so long convincing himself I was fragile that he forgot I was also the woman who once rebuilt a corrupted server from scratch at midnight with a newborn on her chest. I walked to the bedroom, closed the door, and moved fast. I grabbed my coat from the closet. I tucked the second phone deep into the inside pocket. I opened the bedroom window that faced the back garden, the one that looked out over the low hedge separating our yard from the walking path behind the property. I climbed out. The October air was sharp. I crossed the garden without looking back, pushed through the hedge, and walked, did not run, down the path toward the far end of our street. Running draws attention. Walking is invisible. 2 houses down from the corner lived a woman named Mrs. Gable. She was 74 years old, a widow, and the only person on our block who had never once looked at me with that careful, pitying expression. 3 years earlier, I had helped Mrs. Gable quietly restructure some finances after her late husband's estate had been mismanaged. I never charged her a cent. She told me once, "Clara, when you need something, you come to me first." I rang her bell. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and stepped back to let me in without a single question asked. Inside, I pulled out my phone and checked my bank accounts. Every joint account, cleared. My personal savings account, which Elias technically had secondary access to through an old joint filing, 0 balance. He had moved fast. Very fast. Mrs. Gable handed me a cup of coffee and sat across from me at her kitchen table. I told her, briefly and calmly, that I needed to get out of Virginia before the end of the day. She nodded slowly. Then she said, "A few weeks ago, I saw Elias in your garage. Late. With a woman. I thought about telling you, but I didn't want to assume." My stomach tightened. What did she look like? Mrs. Gable shook her head. It wasn't like that. They weren't. It wasn't romantic. They were arguing. She kept pointing at papers she was holding. He kept shaking his head. A woman. Papers. An argument in the garage at night. Mrs. Gable handed me her car keys and a thick envelope of cash she pulled from inside a ceramic flower jar on her kitchen counter. "Go," she said quietly. He is a small man who needed a big woman to make him look tall. Now go be tall somewhere else. I drove north. Somewhere in the middle of Maryland, at a rest stop off I-95, I sat in that car and checked every pocket of my coat before pulling it off to rest. My fingers found something hard and flat sewn into the lining. I ripped the seam open with my thumbnail. It was a GPS tracker, thin as a credit card, actively pinging. I dropped it into the trash can outside the restroom and got back on the road. 20 minutes later, as I crossed the Maryland state line, the second phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I glanced at the screen. The caller ID read one word. Mom. My mother had been gone for 5 years. My mother's name was Vivian. She passed from a stroke 5 years ago, quietly, in a hospital bed in Norfolk, Virginia, while I held her hand and Elias took a business call in the hallway. I stared at that caller ID for 3 full seconds before I answered. The voice on the other end was a woman's, low, careful, slightly breathless. And the first words she said were, "Sweet girl, you need to listen to me very carefully." That phrase, "sweet girl," that was exactly what my mother used to say. Every time, without fail, my skin rose into goosebumps. Who is this? My voice was steady, even though nothing else inside me was. There was a pause. Then, "My name is Julianne. I am Elias's sister. And before you hang up, I need you to know, I left that phone under the bed. It was the only way I could reach you." The world tilted. Elias's sister, Julianne Mercer, killed in a car accident on Route 64 outside of Charlottesville 8 years ago. I had attended her memorial service. I had held Elias while he wept over a casket. "You're dead," I said. "No," she said. "He needed me to be." Over the next 40 minutes, parked on a side road off the interstate, Julianne told me everything. The accident had been real, but she had survived with injuries that were never reported. Elias had seen an opportunity. He paid the attending physician in cash to falsify the death report, collected the life insurance payout of $800,000, and used that money, combined with the cash from my grandmother's jewelry, to fund the company's earliest operating costs. Julianne had been living in Seattle under a different name ever since. And for 8 years, Elias had been using the threat of exposure, criminal fraud charges, falsified death records, to keep her working for him as a secret CFO, managing offshore accounts that the board never knew existed. He hadn't mourned his sister. He had monetized her. "The clinic he wants to send you to," Julianne said, her voice dropping lower, "it is not a medical facility. Clara, it is a private detention center. The patients there are not patients. They're people someone needed to disappear quietly." I pressed my back against the car seat and stared through the windshield at the dark Maryland tree line. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because he told me last week that once you were committed, he was going to report me to the federal authorities himself, to tie up the loose end. I have nothing left to protect by staying silent." If this story has your heart racing right now, go ahead and comment "I'm still watching." I want to know who is with me all the way through this. I was still processing everything Julianne had just said when the car dashboard lit up. Every screen, every digital panel, all of it flickered at once. A message appeared across the center display in cold white text. "Remote shutdown initiated. Police notified." The engine cut off. The car went completely silent. The silence inside that car lasted maybe 4 seconds. Then my brain caught up. Elias was a salesman. He understood people and optics and the art of appearing competent. But the man had never written a line of code in his life. Whatever remote shutdown script he had installed on Mrs. Gable's car, and the fact that he had planted a tracker and pre-rigged a borrowed vehicle told me exactly how long this plan had been running. It was a purchase tool, a commercial product, and commercial products have override protocols. I knew that because I had coded the security layer for a similar fleet management system in 2019. I reached under the dashboard, found the secondary relay fuse panel by feel in the dark, and pressed the manual override sequence against the circuit board. 3 taps, hold, 2 taps. The same sequence I had documented in a technical white paper that nobody at the firm had ever bothered to read. The engine turned over. I drove the rest of the way to New Jersey in the dark without stopping. By 11 p.m., I was in a roadside motel outside of Newark. I paid cash, Mrs. Gable's cash. I used a fake name at the desk. I locked the door, sat on the edge of a bed that smelled like old detergent, and opened my old laptop. I had one place left to look. A private server I had built in 2017 as a fail-safe, what I privately called the black box. It was a mirrored archive of every major file the company had ever processed, encrypted under a personal key that only I possessed. It was never connected to the main cloud infrastructure. Elias did not know it existed. I logged in. What I found was not what I expected. The company's core product, the software I had coded from nothing, had been modified 18 months ago. There was a secondary data pipeline buried beneath the surface architecture. It was quiet, nearly invisible, designed to look like routine telemetry. But I recognized the signature of what it actually was immediately. User data, full profiles, behavioral patterns, financial records of the firm's clients, all of it being siphoned out in small, encrypted packets, transmitted to an external server registered to a holding company in the Cayman Islands. I dug into the registration trail of that holding company for 40 minutes. The ownership chain was layered, 3 shell corporations deep. But at the center of it, attached to the final registration documents, was a name I recognized. The clinic. The same private detention facility Julie Ann had warned me about. Elias had not only been trying to erase me. He had been running a data trafficking operation through the company I built, and funneling the proceeds to the very institution he had chosen to bury me inside. Think about what that means. He was going to lock me away in a place he was financially tied to, a place that had every reason to keep me silent indefinitely. I sat in that motel room and let that land. I was documenting everything, screenshotting, copying file paths, logging timestamps, when the light outside my window changed. A shadow passed across the curtain. Slow, deliberate. Someone was standing just outside my door. I closed the laptop. I did not move. The shadow did not move either. Then the door came in hard. I was on my feet before it fully opened, back against the far wall, watching. It was not Elias. It was a woman, mid-40s, dark coat, travel-worn, with exhausted eyes that somehow still held something fierce inside them. She was holding a handgun at her side, not raised, just present. She looked at me across that small, dim room and said, "I told you I would find you before he did." Julie Ann had not waited for my call back. She had flown in from Seattle. I did not scream. I did not reach for anything. I just stood against that wall and looked at her. Julianne lowered the gun immediately. She tucked it into her coat and held both hands open so I could see them clearly. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said. "I'm here because two of Elias's private security contractors followed my flight out of Seattle. I've been running since baggage claim." She crossed to the window and pulled the curtain back 1 inch, scanning the parking lot. Her hands were steady, but her jaw was tight with the kind of tension that comes from days without real sleep. I studied her face. She looked like Elias around the eyes, same deep-set brown, same slight downward angle at the outer corners. But where Elias's eyes had always carried a performer's warmth, hers carried something weathered. Something that had been through too much to pretend anymore. "You left the phone," I said. It wasn't a question. I had already started to piece it together on the drive up. She nodded. 8 months ago, I managed to get one burner into Richmond through a courier Elias doesn't know about. I programmed my contact under MUM because I knew if you saw that name, you wouldn't delete it before answering. Your mother's name was in Elias's files. He talked about her often. She reached into the inner pocket of her coat and pulled out a flat, black external hard drive. She set it on the dresser between us. "Everything is on there," she said. "The erasure contracts, the legal documents Elias had drafted to have you committed and stripped of your shares. The insurance payout records from my staged death. The offshore account transfers. 8 years of paper trail." I picked it up. It was warm from being against her body. "He staged your death to fund the company," I said quietly. "He staged my death to collect $800,000 and control me permanently," she said. "He told me if I ever went public, he would turn me in for the insurance fraud. Make sure I took the full sentence. He kept me in Seattle, managing money he could never explain on a public balance sheet, for 8 years. She paused. "I was his prisoner who got to live in a nicer room than yours. 2 women. Same man. Different cages." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the curtain, blinding white, moving fast. A heavy vehicle screeched to a stop in the parking lot directly outside our room. Julianne was at the window in 2 steps. "That's them." I was already moving, shoving the hard drive and laptop into my bag. Then his voice came through a megaphone from the parking lot. Calm, controlled. The voice he used at board meetings. "Clara, I know you're in there. Give my sister the drive, and we can still handle all of this medically. Nobody has to go to prison tonight. Don't make me call the authorities and make this harder than it needs to be." I stopped moving. I looked at Julianne. She looked at me. Medically. That word he kept using like a shield and a weapon at the same time. "He thinks we're scared," I said. Julianne held my gaze. "Aren't we?" "Yes," I said. "But scared and finished are 2 completely different things." We had maybe 3 minutes before those men came through the door. I did not spend those minutes packing or panicking. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, connected to the motel's Wi-Fi, and went to work. Deep inside the company's server architecture, buried beneath 4 layers of security that only I knew existed, was a protocol I had coded in 2018 and never told anyone about. I called it the sleep protocol. It was designed as a dead man's switch. If I ever stopped manually resetting a 72-hour timer, the entire system would enter a locked hibernation state. No data in, no data out. Every function frozen. I had been resetting that timer every 3 days for 6 years out of habit. I had last reset it 4 days ago. It had already triggered automatically. What I did now was different. I went in manually and accelerated the secondary effect, a system-wide broadcast that would push a single message to every registered employee device in the company. I signed it with my private coding alias, the one I had embedded into the original architecture in 2015, the one that proved, beyond any reasonable argument, who had actually built the infrastructure. The message read, "System integrity breach detected. All operations suspended pending ownership verification. CV Architect." It went out to 340 devices in under 8 seconds. Julianne watched over my shoulder. "He is going to know that was you." "That's the point," I said. Outside, we heard footsteps on the concrete walkway. More than one set, moving deliberately toward our door. I pulled up the second phone. While Julianne and I had been talking, from the moment she walked through that door, the phone had been running a background audio stream to a secure cloud folder I had set up using an app one downloaded at the library in New Jersey. Every word, every admission, Julianne's full account of the staged death, the blackmail, the offshore accounts, all of it recorded, time-stamped, and stored somewhere Elias could not touch. "We have to go," Julianne said. I closed the laptop. She was already at the back of the room, pushing the bathroom window open. We went through it one at a time, me first, then her, dropping into the narrow alley behind the motel just as we heard the room door take a hit from the other side. We moved fast through the dark. 2 blocks away, Julianne had a rental car parked on a side street, paid for in cash, registered under a name that no longer officially existed. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then my phone buzzed. It was a company security alert, automatically forwarded to my alias account. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting. Midnight. Richmond. Elias was moving to contain the damage. He was going to stand in front of that board and rewrite everything before morning. I looked at Julianne. "We aren't running anymore," I said. "We're going to that board meeting." I held up the laptop. "But we're not walking in. I'm logging in. Now I want to ask you something directly. If you were sitting in that car right now, with the evidence, the recording, and everything on the line, would you take the money and run, or would you risk it all to face him head on? Comment run or face him. I genuinely want to know what you would do." The emergency board meeting began at 11:58 p.m. I know because I was watching it. 3 months before any of this started, during routine maintenance on the building's AV infrastructure, I had quietly linked the boardroom's display system to the building's emergency backup power grid, a separate circuit that ran independently of the main building controls. It was a precaution I coded into the system in case of a presentation failure during an investor event. I had never told Elias it existed. From the passenger seat of Julianne's rental car, parked in a rest area off I-95, I connected remotely to that AV system through a secondary admin port I still had full access to. On the boardroom's 100-inch display screen in Richmond, the meeting was already underway. Elias stood at the head of the table in a fresh suit, composed and measured, working the room the way he always did. He told the 7 board members that Clara, his wife, had suffered a mental health crisis, had gone missing, and had, in the process, somehow convinced his late sister to participate in what he called a coordinated disruption of company operations. He said I had stolen proprietary access credentials. He said Julianne, A woman they believed had been dead for 8 years was clearly being manipulated by me in my unstable state. He was good. He was very good. 3 of the board members were nodding. Then he called for a formal vote to remove my name from the corporate charter. The room lights flickered once. Then they went out completely. 3 seconds of darkness. Then the 100-inch screen came to life, powered entirely by the emergency backup grid, running off a signal that Elias had no access to cut. My face filled that screen. I did not look frightened. I had taken 20 minutes in that rest stop to compose myself. I spoke slowly and clearly into my laptop camera. I did not lead with the affair. I did not lead with the money. I opened with the patent filings. Document by document, I walked that board through 10 years of intellectual property records. Every core patent filed under my Delaware shell company. Every technical white paper authored under my coding alias. Every line of foundational architecture timestamped to my personal development environment. I showed them the original 2014 server logs, the ones that recorded my credentials as the sole active user during the 340 hours it took to build the platform from nothing. Elias did not build this company, I said. He fronted it. There is a difference. And the patents that make this firm worth what it is tonight, they belong to me. Elias moved toward the screen. He grabbed the power cord and pulled it from the wall. The image stayed. He stared at the screen. Then he pulled a second cable. Then a third. The image stayed. One of the board members stood up slowly. He was the lead investor, a man named Warren Holt who had been in the industry for 30 years and had never once, in my memory, raised his voice. He raised it now. Elias, he said, there is a federal agent standing in the lobby of this building. They are not here for Clara. He looked at the screen, where Julianne had stepped into frame beside me. They are here for the woman standing behind her. The one your family buried 8 years ago. The room went completely still. Elias stood at the head of that table for a moment that seemed to stretch beyond its actual length. I watched it on my screen from the rest stop. I watched the exact moment the performance ended. Not with a dramatic collapse, just a slow, almost imperceptible drop of his shoulders. The kind that happens when a person finally stops holding something up. The federal agent who entered that boardroom was from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The tip had been filed 2 hours earlier from a secure submission portal, using the audio recording from the motel, the contents of Julianne's hard drive, and the black box data showing the offshore transfers and the user data trafficking pipeline. I had filed it from a public computer at a 24-hour copy center in New Jersey before Julianne arrived. Elias was arrested on the boardroom floor at 12:41 a.m. The charges included insurance fraud, identity falsification, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit unlawful detention. His attorney, not Bart Hensley, who was already the subject of a separate bar complaint I had filed, arrived 40 minutes too late to do anything meaningful. By 9 a.m. the following morning, I was in Richmond. I walked into the building through the front entrance. The lobby security guard, a man named Roland who had worked the desk for 6 years and always greeted me as Mrs. Mercer, looked up when I came through the door and said, simply, "Good morning." Not Mrs. Mercer, just good morning. Like he already understood something had changed. They were bringing Elias through the side corridor as I crossed the lobby. He was in handcuffs, flanked by 2 agents, still in last night's suit. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him look. Not physically, just smaller in the way that people look when the story they have been telling about themselves finally stops working. He saw me. He stopped walking for just a moment. "You'll be nothing without my name," he said. Quietly. No audience. Just the two of us. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I held it out, and one of the agents took it from my hand to pass to him. "That's the paperwork," I said. "The company name reverts to my maiden name tonight. It always should have been." He looked at the envelope. He did not open it. The agents moved him forward, and he walked out through the side door and did not look back. The second phone buzzed in my coat pocket one final time. The caller ID read, Meridian Wellness Center. The private clinic. The director, calling from inside a facility whose operating debt I had quietly purchased through a financial broker at 7 a.m. that morning, using the first withdrawal from my reinstated company accounts. He was calling his new boss. I let it go to voicemail. "Be honest with me right now. Do you think Elias got exactly what he deserved? Or do you think there was something in Clara's story she never fully showed us?" Tap like before this ending if any part of this shocked you, and comment yes or a no. The house in Virginia was quiet when I went back to it one last time. Not the heavy quiet of a place full of secrets, just the ordinary quiet of a house that no longer had anything to hide. The legal team had already begun the asset partition process. The furniture, the art, the investment accounts, all of it would be addressed in the months ahead. I was not there for any of that. I was there for a small cedar box on the top shelf of the bedroom closet. Inside it was my grandmother's jewelry, the pieces I had not sold, a ring she wore every day of her adult life, a thin gold band with a small inlaid garnet, a pair of earrings she gave me the Christmas I turned 16. I held that ring for a long moment before I put it on my own finger. Then I closed the box, tucked it under my arm, and walked out of that house without looking at a single room. 2 months later, I completed the structured sale of the company. Not a rushed liquidation. A proper, board-approved transaction to a mid-sized technology firm out of Atlanta that had been interested in acquiring the platform for years. My 50% interest, combined with the patent portfolio I held outright, yielded more than I will say here. Enough. More than enough. Before anything else, I set up a trust for Julianne. Enough for her to begin again, truly begin, under her real name, in whatever city she chose, without looking over her shoulder. She called me the day the transfer cleared. She did not say much. Neither did I. Sometimes the most meaningful things between people do not need a lot of words. Bart Hensley surrendered his law license 4 months after the board meeting. The neighborhood watch in our old Richmond subdivision quietly disbanded not long after. I thought about those neighbors sometimes. The ones who had accepted Elias's version of me without ever once knocking on my door to ask how I was doing. I did not feel rage toward them. I felt something more like a tired understanding. People believe the stories that are told to them with confidence, especially by someone who looks successful. That is not wickedness. That is just human nature, and it is worth remembering. I moved to a town on the Gulf Coast of Florida in the spring. Small place. Unhurried. I rented a house 3 blocks from the water, got a library card, and started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. One morning, early, the sky still more gray than gold, I walked down to the beach and stood at the edge of the water with a cup of coffee and a new phone. Not a fancy one, just a phone. and in it, only the numbers of people who had shown me, through action rather than words, that they were genuinely in my corner. There were not many numbers. That was not a sad thing. That was the whole point. I stood there and I thought about the 10 years I had spent building something magnificent for a man who was, in the end, mostly a reflection I had polished so well I could no longer see myself in it. Your value is not a mirror of who you help. It never was. Your value exists in what you do when no one is watching, in the code you write at 4 a.m., in the jewelry you quietly sell so someone else's dream can breathe, in the quiet choice to keep going when the floor gives out beneath you. I spent a decade building his dream because I believed my worth was tied to his rise. Letting go of that idea, not in a single dramatic moment, but slowly, imperfectly, over many ordinary mornings, was the hardest and most necessary work of my life. Finding that second phone did not break my life. It handed it back to me. If this story moved something in you, even a little, hit like right now, and tell me in the comments which part of Clara's journey crossed a line for you. I read every single one, and I will be pinning the most honest take I find. Drop your thoughts below. And today's shout out goes to @Grace and Grit, who left this comment on our last video. A silent builder is still the one who owns the blueprint. If you want to be featured in the next video, leave your most genuine, unfiltered reaction in the comments right now. We will see you in the next one.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And guess what? The story doesn't end here. Click on the video right here on your screen to dive into another fascinating story. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Once again, thanks for being a part of this amazing community. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring stories that move you.